Hello everyone! Today we are back on the north side of Charlotte to talk about one of the 27 signers of the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, Hezekiah Alexander. He is buried in the Sugar Creek Presbyterian Church Cemetery along with Abraham Alexander, but unfortunately we can't get into the cemetery to leave a flower at his monument because the cemetery is chained and locked. But I'm really excited to show you Hezekiah Alexander's house, which is still standing to this day, and talk about him while we explore the house. His home site is today property of the Charlotte Museum of History. Hezekiah Alexander was born in the late 1720s, and he and his family were of Scotch-Irish ancestry living in Cecil County, Maryland. Hezekiah's father, James, was a magistrate and an elder in the Presbyterian Church, and his mother's name was Margaret McNitt. Hezekiah learned the blacksmithing trade and bought land in Franklin County, Pennsylvania. He married a woman named Mary Sample in 1752. However, with the outbreak of the French and Indian War, they were forced to flee. Hezekiah purchased land near the Catawba River in Piedmont, North Carolina, which was an area where many of his family and Presbyterian friends were settling. As a county, Mecklenburg was only 5 years old, and there were only 777 residents, which is so wild to me to think about, as there are over 1 million people here today. As we've learned in other videos this month, pioneers were coming by the thousands of wagon loads during the fall and winter of 1765 to North Carolina from Philadelphia via the Great Wagon Road. The population doubled during that first year that the Alexanders lived here. Hezekiah made several purchases of land totaling about 600 acres. Hezekiah rose, along with Thomas Polk, to become one of the most influential men in Mecklenburg County. He was an elder of the Sugar Creek Presbyterian Church, led by the fiery preacher Alexander Craigshead. In 1768, Governor William Tryon appointed Hezekiah as the county magistrate, and 3 years later as treasurer and trustee. Hezekiah also played a prominent role in the creation of Queen's College, which was the first college chartered south of Virginia and the only school for the training of Presbyterian ministers south of Nassau Hall in New Jersey. From the very beginning, the large population of Presbyterian settlers in Mecklenburg County were at odds with the Crown. They opposed the land claims of Governor Arthur Dobbs and Lord George Selwyn, which resulted in the Battle of Sugar Creek, which is a pretty neat story that we will talk about more in Thomas Polk's video in a couple of weeks. The Presbyterians also deeply resented laws that placed restrictions on their ministers and taxed the inhabitants for the support of the Anglican Church. A petition to the governor was drafted in 1769, warning him that there were in the county over 1,000 members of the Church of Scotland who were able to bear arms and would be more than ready to support the government under which they would find the most liberty. However, when new restrictions were levied on the American colonies by Parliament and the king refused to grant a charter for the new Queen's College, Hezekiah decided to support the actions of the Continental Congress and became a member of Mecklenburg's Committee of Safety. Hezekiah was an effective public speaker, and he was active in a series of public meetings held by that committee during the winter and spring of 1774 to 1775. Following the news of the outbreak of fighting at Lexington, he was one of the 27 men that met through the night of May 19th through 20th, 1775, to draft and sign the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. He also took part in the adoption of the Mecklenburg Resolves of May 31st, 1775, that declared all British laws and authority to be null and void, a document about which the royal governor wrote to England. These were the most treasonable publications that this continent have yet produced. Captain James Jack, who famously carried a copy of the Resolves to the North Carolina delegation in Congress, remembered Hezekiah as a chairman of those meetings in May of 1775 and said that Hezekiah played a major role in bringing about the break with Great Britain. In September 1775, the Patriots organized a council and district committees of safety to oversee the town and county committees of the provinces, and named Hezekiah to the Salisbury district. In December of 1775, this committee sent a military expedition to western South Carolina and crushed the Tories there. Alexander outfitted and supplied the expedition as its commissary. In May 1776, when the district committees were abolished and powers were given back to the council, he was selected to be one of its 13 members. With his colleagues in this office, Hezekiah saw to the raising, provisioning, and financing of the Patriot forces, served as the highest judicial body, and determined civilian and military policy in the province. The action taken by the council in the first few years of the revolutionary conflict were crucial in determining the success of the revolution in North Carolina. Following the Mecklenburg Declaration and Resolves documents, the council called for a Congress to meet at Halifax in November to establish a permanent government for the state of North Carolina. Hezekiah was elected a delegate to this Congress and was a champion of the Democratic forces in Mecklenburg in opposition to the more conservatives under Thomas Polk. His chief lieutenants were Waite Still Avery, an attorney who was boarding a room in his home, and his younger brother, John McNitt Alexander. Because of his council reputation, Hezekiah was placed on the committees at Halifax that drafted the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. His influence helped make the North Carolina Constitution, second only to Pennsylvania's, the most democratic of those that were drawn. After the war, with his major work accomplished, Hezekiah lived out the rest of his years in Mecklenburg County with his family, his wife, his 7 sons, and 3 daughters in their beautiful home that they built in 1774, which is still standing to this day. Hezekiah continued to play a leading role in the affairs of his church and served wisely and conscientiously as a county magistrate until 1784. He passed away in 1801 and is buried in the old cemetery grounds of his church, the Sugar Creek Presbyterian Church.